announced yesterday was that Fitch is upgrading Ghana from restrictive default to triple C. And so begins the next part of a journey of the cyclical economic ride that we're on, whereby Ghana will now be systematically upgraded to the point where we reach investment grade again at some point, such that we will be able to issue debt at a point when Western economies will be looking for a way to increase their yields and returns on their capital. And so the cycle continues. And at some point at the end of the cycle, just as this one just finished and caused this crisis for us, what will happen is that hot money that will come to Ghana will be pulled away, and it will cause the spreads to widen, the cedi to weaken, and it will look like bad economic management. I'm sure, again, as it was last time, as it was this time, the people of the country will complain and cry out that they are suffering at the hands of the politicians of this country. And so, Willie, tonight, let's talk about this question of whether the response to the crisis is resulting ultimately in a reversal of something that we called government crowding out of the private sector, whereby now capital cannot go to the government and therefore must go somewhere and should go to the private sector. So that's the first part of the restructuring. That results in ultimately the decision-making power transferring from government to the private sector, whereby the two entities now play a different role, but focused on their core purpose, where government should focus on creating the regulatory environment that allows for the private sector to then grow, to thrive, to experiment, and take risks in a safe and healthy and sustainable way. Is that where we are going, Willie? Now that, do we have evidence? Okay, that's the first question. Do we have evidence, anything we can actually hang our coat hangers on, that the private sector is taking the baton from the government and increasing their power in raising capital and monitoring risks and taking risks, etc.?
Okay, so first of all, what I would say is, I don't know if saying taking the baton from government is the right way to put it, because it's not like the private sector actually decided that we are taking it from government. I take the fact that it's rather on the reverse. Although it has been necessitated by circumstances, it is government that has decided to do a lot of things with private sector first, and then now it has actually decided to go on such a direction, making it openly that, I mean, we want private sector's collaboration, we want private sector's input, which is supposed to be originally the norm.
So why was it that we've lived for such a long time in a country where the government was always the institution that was looked at for creating jobs, for raising capital? I mean, if we think about it, we talk about how many jobs the government creates. We talk about how much it's able to raise on capital markets globally every year. It is the only person who's been able to raise paying fat returns to those who are able to lend to it. So why have we lived in that world instead of the more orthodox world where the private sector leads risk-taking? Why are we upside down?
As much as somebody would say our democracy is quite matured as at this point, because we are several decades into democracy, a couple of decades into the democracy, especially this latter one, we would still say there's a lot of misconception, and we are still struggling to structure our things right. Everybody's definition, especially in Africa here, of what democracy is a little misconstrued. So, I mean, if you what you expose the people to is what they demand of you, or what you tell them is what they demand of you. So if it is, let's say, let me use a typical example. If it's an MP's job to make laws or speak for his people and probably put in words for his people, I mean, to support their direction of development, and you go to stand with the people when you're asking for power, and you tell them that you are going to provide them, which is not really your duty. That's exactly what you're going to demand of you.
Right.
So it's a typical trail, right from the local level to where we've gotten to at the central level. So at the central level too, what government is not really supposed to be responsible for is what a lot of the people assumedly expect government to be doing.
Right.
And government seems to be playing to that tune a lot of the time. And I mean, we can do anything. Nobody has really decided at a point to change it till where we've gotten to. So it looks like we've gotten to a point where, like I had already said, situations are pushing us to get to that tangent, which is where we should have originally been. But whether we're going to go long haul or it's going to be, in bits or taking a portion, that's what we are yet to know. Okay,
so the nature of that restructuring is still evolving, and the depth to which we will allow it to continue is also still in question. Because of course, as you restructure, there's a price that is paid, right? In every restructuring, whether you choose to approach change or you're forced to take change, it's painful either way. Either you control that choice, which makes it feel less painful because you're in control, or you get smashed in the face because you don't want to take that change, in which case you're just made to pay the price up front. Now, of course, what's happening to Ghana is that we didn't put that structural change in place beforehand, so we got smashed in the face when it got wrong. So now we're putting that structural change in place. So, Willie, what does that structural change look like? What does it look like to have an economy that is private sector led? What does that actually look like?
A private sector led economy, automatically, that's where I would describe as the free world of business. So automatically it assures you of efficiency, competitiveness, and you know what that seeks to bring. You seem to get the best at the best prices, and then because the markets are also segmented a lot of the time, they are customized products for customized people, and it covers a bigger and wider market or a bigger or wider audience.
Yes.
So, it's the best anyone could have, like in the West. It's private sector led, basically. And then government is in charge of the regulations or maybe the environment, making sure that the business environment is viable for business thriving.
So just frame it out. The ideal private sector led risk-taking business environment is one in which the private sector drives the risk-taking, the project management, the capital raising, the research, the risk management, etc. And the government institutions are responsible for creating the enabling environment to create policies and then to regulate and make sure that everyone's following the rules that govern the playground that everyone is competing in, and making sure that everyone is competing fairly and etc.
There is a high in there somewhere where there are areas that probably government might have identified to be probably productive to or essential to the country.
Right.
Areas the private sector might not have identified as profitable yet.
Right.
Those areas government can jump in there, but at least it is still open. It's not like the private sector could go there, but just that based on business interests, they are not yet ready to go there. Those areas, yes, government can jump in.
Right.
So there's still a government factor in there, not just being a regulator.
Right,
yes,
okay.
But those areas are the areas usually you would find government.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
exploratory.
Very good. So the dynamic of being able to take those types of risks is being able to raise capital in order to pursue those ideas. Now, the person or the entity that has historically in Ghana been able to, or in Africa, been able to raise almost the lowest rate of borrowing is the government. And the way because that's the reference rate, right? And used to be called risk-free, but it's not really risk-free. And that lowest rate that can be achieved by the government is ultimately what the government pays for those who are willing to lend to it. And the private sector, historically in Ghana, has to pay more than the government pays when it has money lent to it. And so it's been more difficult for the private sector to push on and take risks because the returns that you have to have coming back are massive when the rates are so high. Okay? So one of the things that needs to happen if you want a true transition from government to private sector, Tom, I'm coming to you here. One of the things you need in a successful transition from government to private sector led is a reduction in interest rates so that the private sector has the ability to raise capital in a secure and safe and sustainable way. Are we getting there? Is that part of this restructuring we're going through, Thomas?
Well, it needs to be done, but it is one of several challenges we still have to overcome because we have become so used to a fiscally dominated economy that some major changes need to be done. One, in the attitude of government, the state. Let me not say, if I say government, maybe you think it's this government. It's about the state. Because all successive governments in Ghana keep making the same mistake I'm going to come to. Then there's also an attitudinal problem among our entrepreneurial class. When we talk about, you see, naturally, now you're talking about interest rate, you're talking about, when you talk about financing, immediately you go to debt.
Yes, this is true. This is immediate.
All right?
Yes.
The fact is that one of the reasons why banks are reluctant to lend to a lot of people who ask for loans in the private sector is the overly high gearing ratios that these companies have. They want to be overborrowed. If they have their way with the banks, they will be overborrowed.
Right.
All right? We don't believe in equity. We've had a stock exchange now for what? 30 years. How many companies are listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange? After 30 years. We set up the alternative market, GACS, to enable smaller companies to come in. Go and look at the listing on GACS. Most of them are debt, corporate bonds, very, very few equities. We don't, as I said, we've always said we don't want to share. So we rely a lot on debt. Now, the demand for debt alone is one of the things that pushes up interest rates. The simple demand and supply. That's one of the reasons. Now, the debt we're even looking for, now, as you said, the rates are high. Two, the tenors are short. You understand? It's basically not ideal for anything apart from commerce. All right? So we need to overcome this attitudinal problem of being overly reliant on debt, which doesn't help. It's one of the major reasons why there's a high mortality rate for enterprises in Ghana. So that attitudinal problem has to be overcome. You will notice, for example, that when the idea of crowdfunding came in, Bank of Ghana quickly has come out with its crowdfunding regulations for debt. We're still awaiting the crowdfunding for equity regulations from SEC. 2 years after Bank of Ghana has done the one for debt. Now, there's that. Then the second thing we need to overcome is, as William has pointed out, now the public sector will take a step back and let the private sector drive economic activity. But government remains the regulator. And the state, as I will say this, I emphasize the state, not the government, has this tendency to create uneven playing fields. For example, simple example, the tax waivers we are trying to get over. You have a company, for example, you have a company, indigenous company producing something. Then a foreign company now comes in and is given a tax waiver. Automatically it's on uneven playing field. The local companies are at a disadvantage. All right. Then there's the issue of favoritism in terms of even like, okay, private sector, yes, they will do the activity, but a lot of the activity will still be contracts for public sector. All right. Now, when the public sector gives contracts based on political affiliations or ethnicity or old school membership and stuff like that, that is not meritocracy. It will not help the private sector because it is a disadvantage to companies which are the most efficient, and you are giving undue advantage to companies which are least efficient. So we also have to overcome that. If not, the private sector, without addressing those two core issues, the private sector will not be able to perform the role it's now being expected to play.
So, if I see it correctly, it seems to me that the government has been trying in a world where it was difficult for anyone to understand the level of risk within the private sector. So therefore, the government was stepping up as an entity that was more transparent, and therefore the risk could be better measured than in the private sector.
No.
No?
Is that why I talk about interest rates being lower?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
No,
in the
it was
government,
simply because there's less risk where you're lending to the person who prints the money. It's as simple as that.
Okay. Rather than the
that was all it's about.
Right,
That's all it's about.
Assurance. There was surety. I mean,
look, if a private sector company gives you a contract to build something, and government gives you a contract to build something, which one is you likely to get your money?
The government.
It's the private sector.
Right.
All right, but ultimately, because government prints the money, you will feel that your money is safer there.
Right.
Even with the debt restructuring, at the end of the day, yes, the rates are lower, the tenors are longer, but people they're still going to get their money back.
Okay, so then we need to look at some evidence of whether or not the private sector has been raising its capital in lieu of the government being able to raise capital. And so far this year, we understand that there's been something like 1.7 billion CDs worth of commercial paper written by private sector entities via the banks. This is commercial paper is short-term debt. Again, risk-averse lending, risk-averse debt lending. It's the same issue in some way, but it's short-term paper that is used for commercial reasons like trade finance, etc.
Working capital.
Yeah, rather than long-term investment that leads to sort of capacity building.
And it is risky because it's not secured.
Right.
The bank doesn't guarantee, the bank you're working with doesn't guarantee, if not, it will because the bank has acceptance. So basically, commercial paper is unsecured. I mean,
now, at the same time as there's been this growth in commercial paper, this 1.7 billion issued this year, the SEC has announced that it's going to create a market, an alternative market for commercial paper in order to try and influence more the private sector being more able to raise these types of instruments. But of course, we also need to transition then to longer term instruments like equity, etc. And if you look at the equity market, we've seen an appreciation this year, and Ghana's equity market is actually one of the best performing African markets, having appreciated as of now 27% year to date. And then the final piece of evidence that perhaps the private sector is trying to figure out better how to raise capital is work being done to improve the way that we convert gold into dollars in order to refinance the purchase of petrol, an idea which of course was first championed by government in the Gold for Oil program, led by institutions such as MIF, the Mining Investment Fund. But now that baton is being taken by the private sector, which is trying to figure out how to scale that up and mechanize the process. These three examples indicate that private sector is recognizing its responsibility to take that baton, or do they not?
Yeah, they are recognizing it, and it's because it's like there's no option. There's no other option.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we've gotten to. So they need to make a way. Neither than that, I mean, we would have been stuck on the old systems. I mean, if everything was fine,
we just wouldn't be able to raise any capital.
Of
We'd be
course.
stuck.
But private sector needs to work. I mean, it needs to function. So it needs to find other alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, even with this latter parts, like the Gold for Oil part that is taking, it was initially a government initiative. It is along the line when, I think when Bank of Ghana went off,
mm-hmm.
and then the financing support was really, really reduced.
Mm-hmm.
Now you find out that there's a gap. Of course, they need to function. So they need to be pushed to the wall before, instead of making their businesses collapse, of course, then they find a way. And at this point, and it's because government also doesn't have a choice because it doesn't have the room.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have the options. So, this is where we are. Of course, if government had an option, then it will be competition. And like we say, government will be a better option at getting cheaper rates on everything, basically. Mm-hmm. Then it doesn't become attractive for anybody to be even dealing with private sector anyway.
Right.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So, we are pushed to the wall. I'm hoping this new direction really works. and there will be more effort at it. I mean, government has been public about it. I mean, as of today, the launch of the mutual dialogue, prosperity dialogue, you know, government is really open to it. We are hoping that we can go on that tangent. I mean, with all commitment and effort. I keep saying that the capacity of Ghanaians, I have come to realize in over almost 20 years I've been in the space, is phenomenal. There is nothing I have seen that I think there isn't a Ghanaian who can handle it or can make it happen. It's all about commitment. As long as we are committed to it, it can happen.
Toma, he's it's not optimism. He's being courageous and confident. And because he understands and knows the capacity of the people doing these jobs, right? Like in the Bank of Ghana people, the guys in the ministry, the actual guys doing the real work in the Ministry of Finance, like it's really, really hard work, and they have to be confident to be able to do it. Is the commitment enough? You
mean in the public sector?
No. Is the commitment of everyone and their ability, or their ability to recognize their own ability, ultimately enough?
The commitment of the populace generally.
Of the populace generally.
Let's be honest. The commitment of the average Ghanaian is basically to himself, not to his country. I don't particularly blame them for that, because it is the result of a bad example set by leadership or by our elites, not just the public sector, even the private sector elite and all. The bad example of our elite has led to people being committed to themselves, and of course also the exigencies of their very existence. All right, so people don't have a commitment to national goals, economic goals per se. All right, which is why it's difficult to overcome the inordinate dependence on consumer goods that are imported. For instance, I mean, by now people will have listened to the fact that, I mean, buy made in Ghana is good for the economy. But everybody is looking at it like, who cares about the economy? I'm concerned about what is good for my household immediately. So that commitment is not there. I'm sorry to say, it is not there. And unless there's a change in the attitude of the so-called political elite, that commitment will not be. Let me give you an example of what I talk about his commitment. You could criticize J.J. Rawlings during his time for all that he for certain things he did when he was in power. But I relocated to Ghana when, I mean, he had become a democratic president, but the so-called revolutionary era was still fresh in people's minds and everything. And I really believe that based on his man of the people attitudes and the fear of people in the public sector at that time of not falling foul of his strict rules and code, there was a bigger commitment by people to pushing Ghana forward than there is today. We have become more, I mean, selfish, so to say, over the past 2 decades, and that's my observation. When I look at the general attitude of the populace now compared when I first moved to Ghana, I mean, that's why I opted to relocate, because I was so impressed with the commitment of the average Ghanaian to Ghana as an entity. All right, I don't see that anymore. We become much more like Nigeria, which I was running away from. The attitude I was running away from that brought me here to Ghana.
That's fascinating. So that's absolutely fascinating, because it really does encapsulate something about the zeitgeist. You know, really, today I was at a conference that was sort of set up by the Ministry of Finance and a couple of other institutions that basically was called the Mutual Prosperity Dialogue. And it was looking to bring together effectively the parties that were going to be made mutual to these prosperity dialogues was the public sector and the private sector. And just to give you an example of who was there, obviously the government was there, Ministry of Finance was there, but there was one company there called DTRT, Do the Right Thing. It's a company based in Akusumbo who produce world-class apparel for the brands that you know. And so now, as a result of this company, who has recruited basically mostly Kayaye from the various markets around the country, created jobs, livelihoods, support, welfare for a large number of young women predominantly who now produce clothing, world-class apparel that we would normally be importing secondhand onto the streets of Kantamanto. So is this perhaps, and these mutual prosperity dialogues that are looking to hand over the baton in a secure and stable way, another example that we're moving towards that realization of the need to prioritize the privatization?
Like I had said a short while back, I mean, that is where we are, and that's the option. And there are signs to it. Let me reverse backwards and hit a little bit on something Thomas said. So the three examples, aside this last one, the three examples that he gave, when I was talking about commitment, the three examples that he gave, it's all public sector led. The papers, it's all private sector, public sector led. It's public sector institutions. If it is SEC, if it is Bank of Ghana, it's all. So when I talk of commitment, somebody has to drive it, and the person must be committed to it with all these challenges. That is the only way we're going to get somewhere. It's the reason why there's always some form of leadership, I mean, with all the public service institutions, to drive us on the right path so that a national agenda is met. So that's what I meant in context that when I say commitment, whether leadership is showing commitment, I mean, with examples like you gave them, mutual prosperity dialogue. I mean, that's an open, apart from the examples, that is an open way of telling the public sector that we are here. We want to work with you. I mean, we want you to help out. We want to listen to you, want you to make the input because it is your space. And you have to come in and let's all do it together so that it drives Ghana forward. Aside that, is because we've also been pushed to the wall. And there is no option. If we stick to, like the example you give, most of these people are looking for recognition and listening, a voice to listen to them, to see if we can, of course, you can't solve everybody's problem. I mean, that is not realistic anyway. But the little you do, sometimes even just the listening ear, from my professional background, that one alone does like 50% of the job. It motivates. Today, you're talking about that company I had never heard about. And for them to hear you talk about them on radio and maybe somebody mentioning them even during the speeches over there, is some level of motivation, that recognition. And even if you don't give them a dime or create any necessary opportunity for them, it takes them some miles and maybe increase their productivity, which automatically affects the economy. And if you had little tidbits of such all over, of course, we are only going to go forward. So it works. We all know. We have examples from the places we look up to. That's how it's done. And I'm saying we have the capacity. We can make it happen. All we need is commitment.
Toma, I'm going to play devil's advocate. There are examples of countries that are managed in a different way, where there isn't a predominant of power in the private sector. Rwanda is an example, China is an example, where the government takes this sort of command and control function. I mean, should we be concerned if we follow the neoliberal model and give all the power to the private sector, and will we end up in a typical situation like the West is facing today?
Well, first of all, if you're going to give power to the private sector, you have to make sure the private sector is responsibly regulated.
Yes.
In Ghana's society, where corruption is endemic, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector, everywhere. Regulation becomes difficult because people think they can cut corners and pay. If not that they think that they can cut corners and pay. As somebody told me last week, if you are collecting money illegally. All right. All you have to do is make sure that you take enough to be able to bribe your way when the trouble comes.
Yeah.
The only crime you can commit is when you take money illegally, you don't take enough of it. You know. So I mean, but if with responsible regulation, yes. And the other thing is that remember too that in the private sector, well, I mean, look, as the private sector gathers steam, inequality of income will increase, especially in a country like Ghana, where by far the most important factor of production is capital, which means the rich get richer all the time. So you must have a welfare system in place that transfers money from the rich to the poor to ensure that social cohesion is retained.
Is that what elections are for? Sorry.
No, I mean like LEAP, for example,
like
and
real
stuff
programs,
like that.
so
If not,
I'm
you have
facetious.
you have another kind of revolution kind of situation where you see some people becoming mega rich and you can't see what they are doing. All right, and you see this situation right now, people don't realize that that kind of situation is more dangerous now than it used to be because of social media.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
So you need to do that.
So Toma did talk about regulations. I mean, giving it to the private sector, good, but we have to ensure that there's, proper regulations. Yeah. I mean, regulatory environments and frameworks. And who is responsible for the regulations?
Well, public.
So
public
we actually
that is
coming back to the same point. And to the second part he talked about. I actually don't like bulking up the entire private sector and describing them in a particular way, like the corruption, and I like to separate them.
Okay.
I think I've mentioned this to you before. For instance, the gold trading area is an area people talk about to be, there are a lot of criminals in that area and things like that.
Yes.
Very good. Would you believe me if I tell you that I think some of the most honest business people I have ever found are in the gold trading area?
Brilliant.
Let me juxtapose what I'm saying. See, for a very long time, the gold bullion traders, especially the small scale trading licensed traders, were trading on what do you call it? Cash remitted to them. They buy it remitted to them ahead, proud. They go purchase the gold for 17, 15, 20 years. People have been in that business. They are so trustworthy. Majority of them don't have the cash. They are sent the money. They go buy the gold. They send it back and they keep their profit. And that was the business that was going on. And so usually you realize that they were a very quiet area. They are not very popular because that is how they like their things. My little bit into that area, I'm shocked, but that is the area too you find criminals. It gives an example, the fact that the criminals you find are the loud ones. So they are ones that are all in your face, and they are the first people you would see. So it comes back to a business person being able to do his research and doing it well and getting the right person to get that done. It brings me back to another point when I say I don't like bulking them up. So there are two groups of business people. Let me use Ghana. In Ghana, there is the ordinary business person in the private sector, and there is the political entrepreneurs. The political entrepreneurs have helped us mess up the impression we have about the private sector. So these people only deal with government, and every government comes, they will deal with you. They are always in government's face. So half of the time, there is a confusion as to what information. I'm sad today Dr. Izzy is not here. It would have been good if he was here. Sometimes they give the very wrong impressions and solutions because they live in a different world. Because they are used to that area, they know how to get their things easily because they understand the terrain, the public sector terrain, and they get what they want. So sometimes in decision making, why I said I wish Dr. AC was here. When we talk about propaganda, the data can be used in different ways to tell different stories. So if somebody comes with phenomenal data to tell wonderful stories to a minister or to a CEO, the best thing you do is to go verify the data.
Yeah.
You check the data, it is, official data, it's verifiable data. But the story is skewed in somebody's interest. Without you knowing, you approve it. And these people are so good at it, and that's what they've been doing all these years. Right. So half of the time, sometimes we've blamed, as much as we have a lot of politicians who probably have their own personal interest. Sometimes, truly speaking, and honestly speaking, per my experience, it's not really intended for ill purpose.
Yeah.
They see the figures, they see the agenda, they see the opportunity based on a political entrepreneur's description. And if you verify the data, it is right. And it makes sense. What else is he supposed to do? He takes a nice decision, and then he finds out later that it's going against almost 90% of the private sector grouping and just advantage to one person.
Yeah.
But it's not. So we have to look at those areas. Yeah. Our knowledge of the two types of business people.
It's fascinating because ultimately, look, I think it's brilliant that you use gold to tell this story. Because if you think about gold properly, it is literally our biggest export. $8 billion a year by value that we export every year. In any other country where gold is such a big part of the economy, like in Dubai, like in India, gold becomes part of the culture. But in Ghana, the storytelling does not, you don't see Stone Boy and Shatawale and all the, Sarkodie guys showing gold in a way that is classy and stylish and creating a market
what of cocoa
and demand internally.
What of even cocoa?
It's the same for cocoa. We don't do that either. It's insane.
Yeah.
When we think about it. Thomas, storytelling.
I want to add some perspective to what William has just said.
Yes.
When he talks about the fact that there are some of the most corrupt people and some of the most honest people in the gold industry. Now, the fact those honest people there shows one thing. If you give people the right economic opportunity, and they know that opportunity will remain available to them as long as they keep doing the right thing, they will stay on the straight and narrow.
Yes.
Because they don't have an incentive to be corrupt. Yes. Because they are making a good living from doing the right thing. As William will always point out, no matter the regulatory environment, they will always be the bad guys. They will always be bad guys anyway, so let's put them aside. But you see, one thing I like when he says he doesn't like grouping public sector, I quite agree with him, but for a different reason. The people who run the public sector, where did they come from? Mars, Venus, or
grouping
or
the private sector, I mean.
That is like labeling them, kind of.
No, putting them all together.
Okay.
Yeah, putting all of them together because there are different types of the private sector. The majority, rather, are in a different group. Those usually in our face, rather, are the minority, and they determine a lot of things.
But even the bad guys.
But even the public sector, trust me. In fact, okay.
So let's give the example. Sorry, Thomas, finish your point.
Let me finish. Even the bad guys in the public sector, they don't come from Mars, they don't come from Venus, they don't come from Pluto. They come from the same society as us. Let me give you a very simple example. The media keeps carrying this argument, keeps carrying the effort, the campaign to stop corruption. But quickly, I'm sure by now you'll have seen, that the average journalist, when he goes to an event, he's not giving his story or tea, and he's not going to carry the story. Now, what is that? Is that not a bribe?
Yeah.
I mean, what are we talking about?
You say it's TNT.
Yes.
I remember. I still remember when I was editor of BNFT.
But please, make us say something. Journalists really don't get paid a lot of money.
That is what I'm coming
That's
to.
True,
this is what I'm coming to. That's why I started by talking about the economic opportunity thing.
I'm very much aware.
A lot of the guys I know, my colleagues who are business journalists, they insist on getting their solid. But these are people I talk with on a social level apart from on a professional level. And I know that these guys, if they were earning 2-3 times what they were earning today, which really they should be earning if they were like in Nigeria or South Africa or one of these where the media people are paid properly, they wouldn't be insistent on solid.
Yeah.
You understand? I mean, a lot of my colleagues, when they are preparing to write their story, it hurts them that they're going to have to write the story in a certain way because their conscience tells them because they were given this and that, they have to write in a certain way, but they don't feel that is the real story, that the story should have a different perspective. You understand?
Yeah.
But I mean, he who pays the piper. That's why I started by saying that if you give a proper economic opportunity to people and show that if you do the right thing, they will stay there.
This is a brilliant argument.
Yeah, but the issue is that you need, as both of you have said, to get to that level, you need leadership. When you have leaders who are setting bad examples, and even though they're in the minority, those are the ones who get into the headlines. Then it becomes difficult to get the people who, even in the private sector, who are going to play straight.
Let me show you a system that I think explains this very well. And by the way, Toma, I think your point is brilliant because it shows you something very clearly. The starting point is that journalists don't get paid anywhere near what they should be paid in this country. A great journalist might be earning 3,000 cedis a month.
Yeah.
A leader of a journalist might be earning 5,000 cedis a month. The managing director of a journalist entity might be earning
average print newspaper journalist who goes to function, the average one, not the ones in graphic and PFT, the average one in these small paper you see, earns less than 2,000 a month.
That's
less than 2,000 a month.
$100 a month, my people.
In fact, it's true.
Not enough
at all.
The Soli, they get more from the Soli than from their salary. That's why they are so insistent on the Soli.
Like the police, like everybody else in this country, when you don't earn enough money to look after your children, your wife, your house, your mom, etc., what are you going to do?
Kweku, if you're on 2,000 a month, let's be honest, where can you, by time, if you are going to, even late in Medina, how much is a two-bedroom house? Even if you are paying monthly, that alone will take away half of your salary or more.
Even your TNT to work and back every day, how much would it cost? So, yeah, but I do admit that, because in fact I did 6 years tertiary education in communication. So I stayed throughout my 6 years. I was with practitioner journalists in class almost every time, and it's one of the areas that are most ill paid. Yeah, I admit. In fact, a lot of the people you even see, the younger ones that you see, some of them are not even on payroll.
It's phenomenal because
some of them are not on payroll. Some of them actually only depend on their solid.
And let's not give people the impression that it's just the media. There are a lot of private across various sectors.
But Kweku, I need to go into just one thing. But you see, Toma talks about our orientation and then changing the narrative. And in this country, if you want to talk about, like, it's a journalist who actually said the agenda, what we want the narrative, what we want to talk about.
Yes.
In the West, we talk about people's value is their net worth, basically their investment mainly.
Yes.
Here, we don't talk about that. So, of course, if you were talking about the industrialists in this country, if they were the people of focus, which could be led by of course, they are also interested in their business. Anybody giving them additional mileage, they would have been interested in them. It would have brought a lot more resources to that sector. But unfortunately, we look at the people who don't invest in a lot of investments locally, or quick wins that do not generate extraordinary for the economy. And of course, they would only give you handouts, and it will not bring money into the industry. I think that's a narrative we need to change.
I remember even your journalists and other people like that who are earning like 2,000 a month. Remember too, they are part of a rat race. They sit back, they sit down, they're doing hard work, they're earning 2,000 a month. They see their classmates from university or secondary school who is working in some government institution and is on the take, and who has built 4-5 houses, has 4-5 cars, he knows this guy. The journalist is far more knowledgeable than him.
Can I frame that? Before you carry on, I want to frame the person you're talking about. Okay, this one day I have to talk about it. This is a public sector example of what you always talk about, which is that our leaders come from amongst us. The Ghanaian the Ghanaian passport service is under pressure. There's a large number of Ghanaians trying to leave the country. It's also resource strapped. Can't pay a lot of money, and these books cost a lot of money. The process is expensive. The ability to source books is apparently constrained. So there's a system in place where if you go to apply for a passport today, even if you pay 100 cities, 200 cities, ultimately the date that you will get your details captured is about 6 months away, and then the date that you actually receive the passport is another 5 or 6 months away. So if you apply for a passport today, you'll receive it next year in October. Now, of course, that's even for renewals. It's for any type of passport. It's obviously unsustainable because there are people who need to travel right now. Lots of people. So we've created a system where if you want to get your passport quickly, you can.
Officially.
Right? Officially, right?
Pay more.
Everybody has to pay like 2,000 cedis. When they pay 2,000 cedis, they can get their passport like within 2 weeks. I suspect about half of the applications that go through the passport office pay that 2,000 cedis or more. And what's remarkable is those passports all get delivered on time. So effectively, you have a system that is capable of delivering the passports on time if everyone was able to just officially pay the 2,000 cedis.
And please take note that for most things you need from public sector institutions, the passport office is doing this thing officially.
Mm-hmm.
There's an unofficial regime that does the same thing.
Yes.
You pay some extra money and the thing goes through the mill. All the people along that, the supply chain to get the documents you need are part of that pipeline.
Yes.
And share in the extra money that is paid.
Correct. And
from Ghana cards to national health insurance.
Thank you. It's not just the passport
to
office.
That,
to the
driver's license.
Every single person.
Everything.
Okay, so we
even to getting a meter from ECG.
The passport office had permission to do the premium service, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It was supposed to be based on research and people had structured, and so I'll not cut them any slack. No. Try DVLA, their premium service. So whoever got it wrong as passport office, I don't think should be cut any slack.
Okay.
Moreover, I think people are benefiting on the side. Those people,
yes.
How are they able to acquire the books?
Yes.
On an unofficial note? So the system is now digitized. You know who should be getting it at what time.
Mm-hmm.
There is enough monitoring for somebody to be sitting somewhere and be able to tell what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is not doing their job. I won't cut them any slack. I understand. In the same example I'm giving as DVLA,
yes.
You would still find some of these things, but the premium people still get their work done based on the official value that has been given.
Yes.
Those people get their job done. The other side on the works. So if you choose to go on the giving to a private person for a huge amount, that's your business. Mm-hmm. But officially, there's a premium area. You pay higher, you get it done between the periods that it said it will be done.
Yes.
So somebody, in the same public sector, somebody is not doing their job. And sometimes I think we have to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is not doing their job. You would find some, of course, there would always be that. There would always be that extra.
Hold on. Someone's not doing their job. But the entire system, I went to 3 different passport offices in this saga. Took 2 months. But I got my passport in 2 months.
So, but you see, it's a pragmatic system.
Yes.
But let's look at the repercussions. Now, a journalist wants his passport quickly because he needs to travel for some assignments and stuff if he has a passport.
Mm-hmm.
He now knows that if he plays straight and doesn't rely on Solly to bend his story in certain ways,
mm-hmm.
because he wants to be honest, he won't get that passport, he won't travel. Mm-hmm. If he relies on bribes, and let's forget Solly, all this Solly and if he relies on bribes at every event he goes for, and as one reporter once wrote for me when I was editor-in-chief of Business Week, and does not start his story by Bank of Baroda, the leading bank in Ghana. That's what Solly can do. I saw it, the leading bank in Ghana, Bank of Baroda. That is what Solly can do. But he does not it does not resort to things like that. He won't get a passport. If he does it, he will get his passport. Yes. What do you think he's going to do?
Yeah. Well, everyone.
And that is even about passports. Sometimes, by the time you are earning 2,000, 3,000, when in this current cost of living crisis, even survivor. Look, I put up my hands here. Recently, I have been forced, I was forced to do something that in my conscience I was not comfortable with what I was writing. Because I needed that money to meet pressing domestic issues. I'm confessing. Look, the difference between me and many of my colleagues that I will confess. I'm more honest.
Come to Asaase Business Roundtable for truth only.
Yes, and I was forced to do it. I was not happy about it. And my wife was there telling me, I explained the situation. My wife was there was telling me that, Toma, cry your own cry.
We've all been there.
Cry, if not, me and you in this house. And I did
We've all been there, my brother.
I did it. It was not that I wrote out like lies, but as William said, you can interpret data in different ways. And in this case, I interpreted data in a way that I knew was not the optimal way to interpret the data, because I needed the money from the person who had offered me the deal. And but look, without it, I would have been in a real major domestic mess in my household. And that is me. So think about the journalists who earn 2,000 cedis a month.
My friends, we've come to the end of another Asaase Business Roundtable. But this is, we've got one last contribution from each of you. But I just want to set it up, right? Because ultimately what you've described is the situation that leads ethnographically to certain behaviors.
Yes.
And my question to you as we finish is, because we're talking about the rebalancing of power from the public to the private sectors. In this restructured rebalancing to the private sector, will these behaviors go away?
No, they will not, because as I said, it is a rat race thing. Look, when you have an economy where professionals like us can sit down, we see how much we are earning, and you have one of these suitcase senior high school leaving people who now becomes a suitcase clearing and forwarding agent, and who is able to connive with customs people and cut corners, and is building houses left, right, and center. How are you going to get the professional to do the right job? He's seen that person who didn't go to school much, illegally making that kind of money while he's struggling. He's going to feel that, look, what I say, if you can't beat them, join them. And that is the attitude of so many professionals who are in positions and who have the capacity to create positive change in the Ghanaian polity.
You have 30 seconds of final responsibility.
I have the feeling people have not been very proactive. I have a typical example of, he talks about the clearing agents. Yeah, I'll be very brief. The clearing agent. There was a clearing agent. There was a company that had a clearing agent who's been helping them cut corners. And one time, the one who's been helping them cut corners had a problem. So he needed to consult somebody else he thought was experienced in the area. The client came with the clearing agent to the new clearing agent. The new clearing agent was straight. These things will always give you problems. Don't go on that tangent. Go on this tangent and just be proactive. Talk to the people. This. The client actually called the new client clearing agent in the back and said, although I'm keeping this guy because I've worked with him for a long time, I want you as my consultant. I was hoping I met you first and you told me the straight. Right. I would have been a straight businessman. So people have not been proactive. People haven't tried. You sit in and you just accept the system as it is. And you think you can't do what they're doing, so you just say, no, push the right. And you meet people who want to do the right thing. Okay. And you would gain from it. I've seen several examples.
You've been listening to Asaase Business Roundtable. Here around the table, William Addo, development economist and consultant. I don't know what to call you. Consultant. You do everything. You give me all the answers all the time. So I go call you different names.
Just call you Mastermind.
Mastermind, Charlie. And Toma Amire, financial analyst and editor. I have been Kwaku Adeboye. This has been Asaase Business Roundtable. We think we might have to come back to this topic at some point soon. Thank you for your time this Thursday evening. We'll be back again next week, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Maybe we'll go see some apparel manufacturing and have a conversation about the cotton chain in Ghana next week. Thank you for your time. Please remember, have a lovely weekend and do look out for each other.